Does the universe end? Buddhist wisdom on the cosmic cycle. Welcome to Buddhist Stories. Have you ever looked up at the night sky and felt a strange mix of awe and insignificance? The vast cosmos stretches beyond our comprehension, an infinite sea of stars, galaxies, and celestial bodies moving through time. But what if I told you that Buddhism has long held profound insights about the life and death of the universe, insights that align with the very fabric of existence? Welcome to Buddhist Stories, where we explore the wisdom of the Dharma, one story at a time. If you're intrigued by the mysteries of the cosmos and how they relate to the teachings of the Buddha, be sure to like, subscribe, and stay with us until the end, because today we're uncovering the Buddhist perspective on cosmic cycles and the ultimate nature of reality. What if the universe isn't permanent? Most of us grow up assuming that the universe is eternal, or at least lasting far beyond our concern. But what if everything we see, from the tiniest grain of sand to the grandest galaxies, is impermanent? What if the universe itself is caught in a cycle of birth, existence, decay, and rebirth just like us? This may sound like a radical idea, but in Buddhist philosophy, it is not only accepted, it is fundamental. Time, according to Buddhism, is not linear but cyclical. Everything, even the cosmos itself, follows the same principle of impermanence, anicca. Just as civilizations rise and fall, and just as our own bodies age and fade, so too does the universe go through cycles of formation and dissolution. The immensity of time. Understanding kalpas. Take a moment to consider time not in terms of days, years, or centuries, but in a scale so vast that it defies human comprehension. In Buddhist cosmology, time is measured in kalpas, immense epochs that stretch beyond anything we can imagine. Imagine this. There is a mountain of solid granite, miles high and miles wide. Once every 100 years, a tiny bird brushes its wings against the surface. The time it would take for that mountain to be completely worn away is still less than one kalpa. Let that sink in. Now, what if I told you that this is just the beginning? That countless kalpas have already passed, and countless more will come? What does that mean for our lives, our struggles, and the things we hold on to so dearly? What does this mean for us? If everything, ourselves, the planet, and even the cosmos is impermanent, does that mean life is meaningless? Quite the opposite. The Buddhist teachings on impermanence do not lead to despair but to wisdom. Understanding the temporary nature of all things frees us from attachment and suffering. Instead of clinging to what is bound to fade, we learn to embrace the present moment with mindfulness and compassion. So what can we do with this knowledge? How do we live in harmony with the impermanent nature of the universe? Stay with us, because in the next part, we will explore how these cosmic truths can transform our daily lives. And remember, if you find these insights valuable, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Let's journey together into the wisdom of the cosmos. The four cosmic stages and the Buddhist view of the universe. 1. Formation. The beginning of all things. In Buddhist cosmology, the universe does not emerge from the will of a divine creator but instead arises naturally, flowing from a boundless field of potentiality. The Visuddhimagga poetically describes this process. At first, there is only an unfathomable void, vast and silent. Then, movement begins. Winds stir in the emptiness, subtle yet powerful, gathering the elements as if weaving a cosmic tapestry. Over an immeasurable span of time, celestial bodies take shape, stars ignite, and entire worlds are born. This vision aligns with the modern scientific understanding of the Big Bang, where a singularity erupted into existence, expanding and cooling to form galaxies, planets, and ultimately, the conditions for life. However, unlike the linear trajectory of Western science, Buddhism views this as a cyclical event, not a one-time occurrence but an endless unfolding, repeating infinitely through the cycles of birth, existence, and dissolution. A Buddhist parable. The Earth's first inhabitants. The Agana Sutta tells of luminous celestial beings who first descended to Earth during a period of transformation. These beings, free from material concerns and radiating an intrinsic light, floated effortlessly through the air. Yet, as time passed, a curiosity for material existence arose. They tasted the essence of the physical world, and with that single act of indulgence, their luminosity began to fade. They grew attached to what they consumed, and desire, tanha, was born. As their attachments deepened, their bodies became heavier, bound to the earth. From this, distinctions emerged, differences in appearance, status, and possession, and thus suffering was born alongside civilization itself. This allegory speaks not only to the origins of human society but to the very nature of attachment. Creation is not merely a cosmic event but a deeply personal experience that unfolds within us. Every moment we cling to pleasure or recoil from pain. We reenact the cycle of formation, giving rise to new conditions of craving and suffering. The lesson here is profound. The seed of suffering is planted when we grasp, and liberation begins when we let go. 2. Duration. The stability of existence. Once formed, the universe enters the phase of relative stability, much like the prime of life. This is the period in which sentient beings flourish, societies rise, and wisdom can be cultivated. It is during this stage that the Dharma is most accessible, guiding beings toward enlightenment. Yet, even within this stability, impermanence, anicca, whispers the reminder that nothing remains unchanged. Mountains erode, rivers shift course, civilizations rise and fall. We often mistake stability for permanence, believing that what is here today will last forever. This illusion is the root of much suffering. Lesson from the Buddha. The poisoned arrow. The Buddha once told a parable of a man struck by a poisoned arrow. Instead of seeking immediate treatment, he demanded to know irrelevant details. Who shot the arrow? What tribe the archer belonged to? What kind of wood the arrow was made from? By the time his questions were answered, he would have succumbed to the poison. This story serves as a powerful metaphor for human distraction. We often spend our lives consumed by questions about the universe, where it came from, what lies beyond it, and why it exists, while neglecting the most pressing reality: the suffering that exists here and now. The Buddha urges us to focus on liberation rather than speculation. The universe's cycle is vast and incomprehensible, but our own suffering is immediate and real. Should we not address what is within our power to change? Thus, in the grand cycle of the cosmos, our time is limited. Instead of being consumed by existential debates, we should devote ourselves to understanding suffering and practicing the path of awakening. Stability, like everything else, will pass. How will we use it before it does? 3. Destruction. The inevitable decline. All things that arise must eventually fall. The universe, no matter how grand, is no exception. Buddhist cosmology describes a gradual disintegration, a time when suffering intensifies, morality declines, and the Dharma becomes increasingly difficult to practice. Modern science echoes this with theories such as the Big Crunch, where the universe collapses upon itself; the Big Rip, where it expands into nothingness; and heat death, where energy is exhausted, and all motion ceases. These scenarios, though different in detail, share a common truth: what has formed must eventually dissolve. The story of Kisa Gotami. Acceptance of impermanence. Kisa Gotami was a mother who, after losing her only child, was consumed by grief. Desperate for a cure, she approached the Buddha, who told her to bring him a mustard seed from a household untouched by death. She searched door to door but found none. Every family had experienced loss. With this realization, her anguish transformed into wisdom. She saw that suffering is universal, and that attachment to the impermanent only deepens pain. Like Kisa Gotami, we too resist endings. We fight against loss, whether of loved ones, possessions, or status. But just as stars must exhaust their fuel and collapse, so too must all things in life reach their conclusion. When we recognize impermanence not as a curse but as the very fabric of existence, we can approach life with greater peace. How often do we cling to what is bound to change? What burdens might we release if we accepted impermanence? For nothingness. The pause before rebirth. Unlike Western notions of an absolute end, Buddhism teaches that destruction is not final but a prelude to renewal. Just as a field lies barren before the next planting, or a breath is fully exhaled before the next inhale, the universe enters a state of rest before the cycle begins anew. Science touches upon this concept with quantum fluctuations random. Spontaneous energy shifts in what appears to be a void. Even in seeming emptiness, potential lingers. In Buddhist thought, karma operates similarly. Even as forms dissolve, the seeds of future existence remain, waiting for the right conditions to arise again. This understanding invites us to reconsider the fear of endings. If even the universe itself moves through cycles of birth and dissolution, why should we fear the changes in our own lives? Every moment of loss is also a moment of possibility. Perhaps the most powerful question we can ask ourselves is this: if everything is in a state of constant becoming, what are we choosing to create in this very moment? Final reflection. Living in harmony with the cosmic cycle. Though the universe moves through grand cycles beyond our control, within our own lives, we have agency. We can choose how to meet each moment, with resistance or with grace, with attachment or with understanding. When we witness formation, can we embrace new beginnings without fear? When we experience stability, can we use it to cultivate wisdom? When we face destruction, can we release attachment and trust in renewal? When we encounter emptiness, can we see it not as loss, but as space for new possibilities? Let us take these cosmic lessons and bring them into our daily lives. Contemplate them. Share them. And most importantly, live them. To applying these cosmic lessons to daily life. Understanding impermanence to cultivate peace. The Buddha once said, "All conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering." These words contain a profound truth, yet in the hurried rhythms of modern life, we often resist the flow of impermanence. We grasp tightly to things, people, and experiences, hoping they will remain unchanged. But if we observe nature, we see a different story. The river never stops flowing, the seasons shift without resistance, and the clouds form and dissolve without attachment. Why, then, do we struggle to accept this truth? The story of the sand mandala. In the serene chambers of a Tibetan monastery, a group of monks bends in silent devotion, their hands carefully placing grains of colored sand into an elaborate mandala. The patterns they create are breathtaking, a testament to their patience and dedication. Days pass, and the design takes shape: intricate swirls, geometric perfection, and an awe-inspiring display of symmetry. Visitors admire the beauty, marveling at the precision and care invested in this sacred work. Then, just as the mandala reaches completion, something astonishing happens. The monks, with calm expressions, take brushes and sweep it all away. In moments, the breathtaking masterpiece dissolves into a formless pile of sand. Some onlookers gasp. A few even feel sadness, as if something precious has been lost. But the monks remain serene. They understand something that many of us struggle to grasp. All things are impermanent. Clinging leads to suffering, while letting go brings peace. Our lives mirror the mandala. We spend years building relationships, careers, identities only to witness them transform, dissolve, or shift in unexpected ways. We experience joy, only to watch it fade. We suffer, only to see the pain eventually pass. When we internalize the lesson of the sand mandala, we begin to free ourselves from suffering. Rather than clinging desperately to what must change, we learn to cherish each moment as it comes, knowing that its beauty lies in its transience. Reflection: the next time something dear to you changes or fades away, pause. Instead of resisting, observe. Can you, even for a moment, embrace the natural rhythm of impermanence? Can you see the beauty in letting go? The power of mindfulness and compassion. In Buddhist practice, two qualities illuminate the path to liberation: mindfulness, sati, and compassion, karuna. Mindfulness keeps us rooted in the present, preventing us from being lost in regrets of the past or anxieties about the future. Compassion expands our hearts, allowing us to see that we are all part of this great cosmic cycle of birth, change, and passing away. The story of the lotus in the mud. A young man once approached the Buddha, troubled by his restless mind. He lamented that his thoughts were like turbulent waters, clouded with fear, anger, and attachment. The Buddha listened patiently and then pointed to a lotus blooming in a nearby pond. "See that lotus?" the Buddha asked. "It rises from the mud and reaches toward the sun. Yet it is not stained by the mud from which it grows. Your mind, too, can be like that lotus." The young man frowned. "But how? My mind is always restless, filled with suffering." "The lotus does not resist the mud," the Buddha said. "It grows from it. Likewise, do not resist your suffering. Observe it with mindfulness. See it clearly, and let it be. The mud nourishes the lotus, your suffering can nourish your wisdom." Through mindfulness, we learn to accept our struggles without being consumed by them. Through compassion, we see that others, too, are wrestling with their own pain. Instead of pushing our suffering away, we transform it into understanding. Instead of closing our hearts, we open them wider. Reflection: the next time you feel overwhelmed, take a breath. Can you observe your emotions without judgment? Can you extend kindness, both to yourself and others, knowing that all beings are navigating their own struggles? The parable of the mustard seed revisited. Perhaps one of the most profound stories in Buddhist tradition is that of Kisa Gotami, a woman whose suffering led her to the heart of the Dharma. A mother's grief. Kisa Gotami was a young woman who had endured many hardships, but nothing compared to the day she lost her only child. Overcome with grief, she carried her lifeless son from house to house, pleading for someone to bring him back to life. Many turned away, unable to offer comfort. Some pitied her, others dismissed her as mad with sorrow. At last, she came to the Buddha. He looked upon her with great compassion and said, "Go into the village and bring me a mustard seed from a house that has never known death. With that seed, I shall restore your child." Clinging to hope, Kisa Gotami hurried into the village. She knocked on door after door, repeating the Buddha's request. Each time, the answer was the same: death had touched every household. Slowly, realization dawned upon her. She was not alone in her suffering. Every family, every person, had experienced loss. Her grief was not unique but part of the universal human experience. Returning to the Buddha, she placed her child's body before him. With a bowed head, she whispered, "I understand now. No one escapes suffering." The Buddha nodded. "Yes, all things arise and pass away. Clinging brings sorrow, acceptance brings peace." From that moment on, Kisa Gotami devoted herself to the path of wisdom and compassion. A lesson for us all. This story is not merely about personal grief, it is a call to awakening. How often do we isolate ourselves in our suffering, believing that no one else could possibly understand? Yet suffering is the common thread that binds all beings. When we recognize this, our hearts soften. We move from self-pity to shared humanity, from despair to connection. Reflection. The next time you face sorrow, look around. See the struggles of others. Can you transform your pain into compassion? Can you use your suffering as a bridge to connect rather than a wall to isolate? Call to action. A practice for daily life. Understanding these cosmic truths is not enough, we must embody them. Here are 3 simple yet powerful practices you can integrate into your daily life. 1. The Impermanence meditation. Each morning, spend a few moments reflecting on impermanence. Observe something around you, a flower, a cloud, even your breath. Notice how it changes. Remind yourself that everything, including your challenges and joys, is in motion. 2. The compassion practice. When encountering another person, silently remind yourself, "Just like me, this person has known suffering. Just like me, they seek happiness." This simple thought can transform interactions and deepen empathy. 3. The mindfulness pause. Throughout the day, pause for a single breath. Notice the present moment. This small act strengthens awareness and reduces unnecessary suffering. Each of us is on a journey, navigating the waves of existence. The Buddha's teachings are not abstract philosophies, they are a living path. An invitation to wake up, see clearly, and live with wisdom and kindness. As you step into the next moment, may you carry these lessons in your heart. Moving through life like the lotus rooted in the world, yet untouched by its mud. 3. Rebirth and the ultimate liberation. Beyond death, the nature of rebirth. One of the most profound and often misunderstood teachings of the Buddha is the concept of rebirth. Unlike many spiritual traditions that speak of an eternal soul transmigrating from one body to another, Buddhism presents a subtler, more intricate view. Rebirth is not a simple transfer of identity. Rather, it is a continuation of patterns, tendencies, and karmic forces that shape the nature of future existences. A ripple in a stream. To understand this, imagine dropping a stone into a pond. The stone disappears beneath the surface, but the ripples extend outward, altering the water's stillness long after the stone is gone. In much the same way, our actions, our thoughts, words, and deeds send out karmic ripples that shape the course of existence beyond the present moment. When this body dissolves, what remains is not an immortal self but the echo of our intentions, imprinted upon the fabric of the cosmos, seeking a new form to manifest. The self that we so dearly cling to is, in reality, a collection of ever-changing conditions. It is like a river that, while appearing continuous, is never the same from one moment to the next. So too are we, impermanent streams of consciousness, flowing through time, bound by the currents of karma. The story of the wandering monk. Once, a devoted monk wandered the forests in search of wisdom. One evening, he arrived at a remote village, where he was welcomed by an elderly woman who offered him shelter. As they sat beside a flickering oil lamp, she asked him, "Master, what becomes of us when we die?" The monk, rather than answering directly, leaned forward, and extinguished the flame with a single breath. Darkness filled the room. The woman gasped, startled by the sudden void. Then, just as swiftly, the monk relit the lamp with a new wick. The flame danced again, casting its glow upon their faces. "Tell me," he said gently, "is this the same flame as before?" The woman pondered. "No, but it was lit because of the first one." The monk nodded. "Exactly. Our existence is like this flame continuing, yet not the same. What we do in this life determines how the next flame will burn. This is the essence of rebirth. A continuation of energy, influenced by the past but never exactly the same. An analogy. Lighting a candle. To further illustrate this, imagine lighting a candle from another candle. The new flame is not the same as the old, yet it was caused by it. This is how Buddhist teachings describe rebirth, not as the movement of an unchanging soul, but as the persistence of karma's momentum. Many of us struggle with the idea of not having a permanent self. But consider this, every cell in your body changes over time. The child you once were is no longer here. Your body, thoughts, and experiences have completely transformed. Yet, you feel a sense of continuity. If this can happen within a single lifetime, why should the transition between lifetimes be any different? When we grasp this truth, we begin to understand that our current existence is but a passing wave in a vast ocean. We are neither entirely separate from the past nor bound to it. We have the power to shape our future through our present actions. Reflection: if your next life were shaped by the actions of today, what kind of rebirth would you create? What seeds of kindness, wisdom, and compassion can you plant now to ensure a better future? Escaping the cycle, nirvana. While rebirth explains the continuity of existence, it also illuminates a greater truth. That liberation lies not in another birth, but in the cessation of suffering altogether. The ultimate goal in Buddhism is not to be reborn in a better realm, but to transcend the cycle entirely. The story of the traveler. A traveler once came upon a vast desert. Before setting forth, he met a wise sage who warned him. Beyond this desert lies an endless chain of mountains and rivers. No matter how far you travel, the journey will never end. The traveler was disheartened. "Then what is the point of walking?" he asked. The sage smiled. "The point is not to walk forever. The point is to awaken and see that there was never a desert to cross. This is the nature of nirvana. We believe ourselves trapped in an endless cycle of suffering and rebirth, but in truth, our bondage is self-imposed. When we realize that suffering arises from attachment to desires, fears, and the illusion of a fixed self, we begin to dissolve the very chains that bind us. Letting go of the fire. The Buddha once likened the mind to a burning fire. This fire is fueled by three poisons: greed, hatred, and delusion. As long as we continue to feed these flames, the fire will burn, consuming lifetime after lifetime. But if we cease to fuel the fire, it naturally extinguishes itself. This state where all craving and suffering have ceased is nirvana. Nirvana is not a place, nor is it annihilation. It is a state of profound peace, where one is no longer bound by the illusions of the mind. It is complete liberation from suffering, a state beyond fear, desire, and the relentless tides of birth and death. Reflection: consider your own attachments. What are the desires, fears, or identities you cling to most tightly? What would happen if you loosened your grip, even slightly? Could you find a moment of peace in letting go? The Buddha's final teaching. As the Buddha lay on his deathbed, surrounded by his disciples, he spoke his final words. All conditioned things are subject to decay. strive with diligence." With these parting words, he offered one last teaching: nothing in this world is permanent. Not even the body of an awakened being. The path to true peace is not in clinging to what must fade, but in embracing the impermanence of all things and walking the path with unwavering effort. A lesson in impermanence. There is a story of a disciple who wept upon hearing that the Buddha would soon pass away. The master, seeing his sorrow, picked up a handful of leaves and let them slip through his fingers. "Tell me," the Buddha asked, "can you stop the leaves from falling?" The disciple shook his head. "No, master." "Then why grieve? Just as the leaves must fall, so too must all things pass. But wisdom remains. Even as we face loss, change, and uncertainty, the path of wisdom endures." The teachings of the Buddha, like the ripples in the water, continue beyond the form of the one who taught them. Our task is not to hold on to what must change, but to embody these truths in our own lives. Call to action, walking the path. The teachings of rebirth and liberation are not abstract concepts to be pondered, they are invitations to transformation. If we understand that our actions shape the course of existence, then we must ask ourselves, how will I live today? 1. Cultivate compassion. Recognize that every being you encounter is traveling through their own cycle of suffering and rebirth. Treat them with kindness, for their struggles are not unlike your own. 2. Practice letting go. Observe the attachments that cause suffering in your life. Can you release them, even just a little? 3. Seek wisdom. Dedicate yourself to understanding the Dharma, not just intellectually, but through direct experience. Reflect on impermanence, mindfulness, and the nature of self. The path to liberation is open to all who seek it. Each step taken with wisdom and compassion is a step toward true peace. As you move through this life, may you walk with awareness, guided by the light of the Dharma. And may you find the courage to let go, awaken, and be free. The End of the Universe, Buddhism's Insight on Cosmic Cycles. Welcome to Buddhist Stories. Have you ever looked up at the night sky and felt a strange mix of awe and insignificance? The vast cosmos stretches beyond our comprehension, an infinite sea of stars, galaxies, and celestial bodies moving through time. But what if I told you that Buddhism has long held profound insights about the life and death of the universe? Insights that align with the very fabric of existence? Welcome to Buddhist Stories, where we explore the wisdom of the Dharma, one story at a time. If you're intrigued by the mysteries of the cosmos and how they relate to the teachings of the Buddha, be sure to like, subscribe, and stay with us until the end, because today, we're uncovering the Buddhist perspective on cosmic cycles and the ultimate nature of reality. What if the universe isn't permanent? Most of us grow up assuming that the universe is eternal, or at least lasting far beyond our concern. But what if everything we see, from the tiniest grain of sand to the grandest galaxies, is impermanent? What if the universe itself is caught in a cycle of birth, existence, decay, and rebirth just like us? This may sound like a radical idea, but in Buddhist philosophy, it is not only accepted, it is fundamental. Time, according to Buddhism, is not linear but cyclical. Everything, even the cosmos itself, follows the same principle of impermanence, anicca. Just as civilizations rise and fall, and just as our own bodies age and fade, so too does the universe go through cycles of formation and dissolution. The immensity of time. Understanding kalpas. Take a moment to consider time not in terms of days, years, or centuries, but in a scale so vast that it defies human comprehension. In Buddhist cosmology, time is measured in kalpas, immense epochs that stretch beyond anything we can imagine. Imagine this: there is a mountain of solid granite, miles high and miles wide. Once every 100 years, a tiny bird brushes its wings against the surface. The time it would take for that mountain to be completely worn away is still less than 1 kalpa. Let that sink in. Now, what if I told you that this is just the beginning? That countless kalpas have already passed, and countless more will come? What does that mean for our lives, our struggles, and the things we hold on to so dearly? What does this mean for us? If everything ourselves, the planet, and even the cosmos is impermanent, does that mean life is meaningless? Quite the opposite. The Buddhist teachings on impermanence do not lead to despair but to wisdom. Understanding the temporary nature of all things frees us from attachment and suffering. Instead of clinging to what is bound to fade, we learn to embrace the present moment with mindfulness and compassion. Call to action: embrace the present, cultivate wisdom. As we navigate our lives, the grand cycles of the universe serve as a mirror for our personal journeys. By accepting impermanence, practicing mindfulness, and cultivating compassion, we align ourselves with the natural rhythms of existence. What can you do today? Practice mindfulness. Take 5 minutes to focus on your breath, acknowledging the impermanence of each inhale and exhale. Reflect on impermanence. Observe something changing around you, a sunset, a blooming flower, and contemplate its transient nature. Act with compassion. Reach out to someone in need, understanding that suffering is universal and kindness is healing. The beauty of life is not in its permanence, but in its ability to change. When we embrace this truth, we step into true freedom. By understanding the wisdom of the Buddha and the vastness of the cosmos, we can find peace not in the illusion of permanence, but in the profound beauty of change itself. If these insights resonate with you, we invite you to share your reflections in the comments. What lessons have you drawn from impermanence? Let's continue this journey of wisdom together. And if you want to explore more about Buddhist teachings on time, existence, and the cycles of life and death, be sure to like this video, subscribe to Buddhist Stories, and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next deep dive into the mysteries of the Dharma. The next chapter awaits. See you in the next video.